The lecture hall was huge. It could hold 300 students, but today only 200 were there. Students from 47 different worlds sat in rows of curved desks. Some had 4 arms. Others floated in clear bubble suits filled with gas. A few looked like giant insects with shiny wings. In the front row, 3 students looked like walking trees with silver bark. Sarah Chen sat in the back corner. She was the only human in advanced xenobiology class. Most students did not talk to her much. They thought humans were boring compared to other species. Humans did not have extra arms or the ability to fly. They could not change colors or read minds. Sarah was fine with this. She liked watching and learning. Professor Veltar walked to the front of the room. He had 4 arms and skin that looked like blue crystal. Light bounced off his body when he moved. His voice was deep and smooth when he spoke. Good morning, students. Today we will learn about apex predators. These are the most dangerous hunters in the galaxy. The room became quiet. Even the floating gas creatures stopped moving. Everyone loved this topic. Stories about deadly hunters were exciting. Professor Veltar pressed a button on his desk. A huge hologram appeared above his head. It showed a massive creature with teeth like swords and eyes like fire. This is a void leviathan from Proxima b. It is 300 feet long. It swims through space itself, hunting ships. The professor's 4 arms moved as he talked. It can sense metal from 1,000,000 miles away. When it attacks, nothing survives. A student in the 3rd row made a scared noise. She looked like a giant cat with purple fur and 6 legs. But wait, Professor Veltar said with a smile. There are worse things. The hologram changed. Now it showed thousands of small, sharp creatures moving like a cloud of knives. The razor swarms of Centauri. Each creature is only 6 inches long, but they work as one mind. They can eat an entire city in 1 hour. They stripped 3 planets clean before we found a way to stop them. More scared sounds came from the students. A tree-like student's leaves started shaking. Professor Veltar seemed to enjoy making his students nervous. The hologram changed again. This time it showed beings made of pure energy, like living lightning. Plasma hunters from the Vega system. They eat energy itself. They consumed 3 entire star systems before they finally went dormant. We still do not know why they stopped. Sarah wrote notes in her small book. She used an old-fashioned pen made of metal and plastic. Most other students used floating screens or thought writers that could read their minds. But Sarah liked the feel of pen on paper. The professor walked back and forth as he talked. His crystal skin caught the light from the holograms and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. All of these creatures are terrible. Each one has destroyed worlds. Each one has killed millions. But none of them. He paused for effect. None of them compare to the apex predators of Sol 3. Some students looked confused. A blob-like creature in the front row bubbled a question. Where is Sol 3, Professor? Ah, yes. Sol 3 is also called Earth. It is a small planet near the edge of the galaxy. Most people think it is not important, but Earth created the most dangerous hunters we have ever found. Sarah's pen stopped moving. She looked up at the professor. Around her, students leaned forward in their seats. The hologram changed to show a blue and green planet with white clouds. It looked peaceful and beautiful. Earth seems quiet now, Professor Veltar said. But millions of years ago, it was a world of monsters. New holograms appeared. Giant lizards with teeth like daggers. Cats with fangs as long as swords. Wolves bigger than horses. Birds with wings that could block out the sun. These creatures ruled Earth for millions of years. They were perfect killers. Fast, strong, smart. They had every weapon nature could give them. The students stared at the images. Even Sarah had to admit the dinosaurs looked frightening when shown this way. But one creature was worse than all the rest. The professor continued. The hologram showed a skeleton. It looked familiar to Sarah. It was a human skeleton. This is Homo sapiens, the most dangerous predator Earth ever created. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. The professor was talking about humans. He was talking about her people. Look at this creature, Professor Veltar said, pointing at the skeleton with 2 of his arms. It has no claws, no fangs, no armor, no poison. It looks weak, yes? The students nodded. Compared to the other creatures they had seen, the human skeleton looked small and fragile. But this creature was the ultimate killer. It hunted in packs like wolves, but with the intelligence of dolphins. It could make tools from anything. Stones became hammers, sticks became spears. It could use fire as a weapon. The professor's voice got more excited as he talked. But the most terrifying thing about Homo sapiens was how it hunted. It was a persistence predator. A student that looked like a giant mantis clicked its mouth parts. What does that mean, Professor? It means they never stop chasing their prey. Other predators attack fast and hard. If they miss, they give up and find easier food. But humans never gave up. They would chase an animal for days. For weeks, they would follow it across mountains, through rivers, over deserts. The prey animal would run until its heart burst from exhaustion. Then the humans would calmly walk up and kill it. Several students made disgusted noises. The idea of being chased for weeks until you died from tiredness was horrible to think about. They were social hunters. The professor went on. They could talk to each other across long distances. They could make complex plans. One group would chase the prey while another group waited to ambush it. They worked together like a hive mind, but each one could think for itself. Sarah looked around the room. Her classmates were listening with fascination and fear. They had no idea that one of these terrifying persistence predators was sitting right behind them. The worst part, Professor Veltar said, was their adaptability. Most predators can only hunt in one environment. Forest creatures die in deserts. Ocean hunters cannot survive on land. But humans could live anywhere. Hot jungles, frozen ice lands, high mountains, dry deserts. They spread across their entire planet in just a few thousand years. The hologram showed a map of Earth with red dots spreading. Across all the continents, they were so good at hunting that they killed most of the other large animals on their planet. Giant ground sloths, cave bears, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats. If humans wanted it dead, it died. A student near Sarah made a worried whistling sound. She turned to look at him. He was one of the ethereals floating in his gas suit. When he saw her looking, he quickly floated away to a seat farther from her. This happened sometimes. Sarah was used to other students being a little afraid of humans, but she had never understood why. Now she was starting to get an idea. Professor Veltar smiled, showing his crystal teeth. But here is the good news, students. We do not have to worry about these apex predators. He pressed his button again. The hologram changed to show ruins and empty cities. Homo sapiens is extinct. They destroyed themselves through warfare about 12,000 years ago. Their planet Earth is now empty of intelligent life. The most dangerous predators in galactic history killed each other before they could spread to the stars. The room filled with sounds of relief. Students relaxed in their seats. The tree student's leaves stopped shaking. The cat-like student started purring softly. So we can study them safely, the professor continued. We can learn about their hunting methods without fear. They are just fossils and bones now. Ancient history. Sarah looked down at her notebook. She had filled 3 pages with notes about her own species. It was strange to hear humans described as extinct monsters. It was stranger still that none of her classmates had realized what she was. She thought about raising her hand. She thought about telling the professor he was wrong. But something made her wait. She wanted to hear more about what the galaxy thought of humans. The professor was still talking. Next week we will study their social structures and mating rituals. We have found evidence of their art and music. Even their religion. It is fascinating how such deadly creatures could create beauty. The class session was almost over. Students started putting away their notes and packing their bags. Sarah remained in her seat thinking. As her classmates filed out of the room, several of them glanced at her. Now she understood those looks. They were not looking at a boring human. They were looking at something that reminded them of the extinct apex predators they had just learned about. They just did not know they were right. Sarah gathered her things slowly. Tomorrow would be another lecture about the extinct humans of Earth. She wondered what other things Professor Veltar would teach her about her own people. She also wondered how long she could keep her secret. The next day, Sarah arrived at class early. She wanted to sit in the same spot and watch her classmates. Now that she knew what they were thinking, everything looked different. When the cat-like student saw her, she moved to a seat farther away. When the floating ethereal noticed her, he dimmed his inner light and tried to make himself invisible. Professor Veltar entered the room carrying a large crystal tablet. His 4 arms moved quickly as he set up new holograms for today's lesson. Yesterday we learned about the dangerous predators of Earth, he began. Today we will study them in detail. I have spent 20 years researching these extinct creatures. What I found will amaze you. The first hologram showed a pack of large wolves with massive teeth. They were chasing a huge hairy elephant. These are dire wolves hunting a mammoth. Both species lived on Earth at the same time as humans. Watch how they work together. The hologram came to life. The wolves spread out in a circle around the mammoth. They took turns attacking from different sides. When the mammoth turned to fight one wolf, another would attack from behind. Eventually, the tired mammoth fell down and the wolves finished it off. Impressive teamwork, Professor Veltar said, but primitive compared to human hunting methods. The hologram changed. Now it showed human figures with dark skin and simple clothing. They carried spears and stone knives. They were following tracks on the ground. Watch this reconstruction of a human hunt. We built it from fossil evidence and cave paintings found on Earth. The hologram humans were following a large deer, but they were not running. They walked steadily, never stopping. The deer would run away fast, then stop to rest. The humans would catch up and the deer would run again. This went on for 3 days, the professor explained. The deer ran and rested, ran and rested. But the humans never rested. They just kept walking. They could walk for days without stopping. A student who looked like a giant bird raised her wing. Why did the deer not just keep running? Good question. Most animals can only run fast for short times. Then they must rest to cool down and catch their breath. But humans had a special ability. They could sweat. Several students made confused noises. Sweating was not common in the galaxy. Most species cooled themselves in other ways. Sweating let humans cool down while they moved. Other animals had to stop and pant with their tongues out. Humans could keep moving in hot weather when other animals had to find shade. The hologram showed the deer getting more and more tired. Its tongue hung out and its legs shook. The humans looked tired too, but they never stopped walking. On the 3rd day, the deer's heart gave out from exhaustion. It collapsed and died without the humans ever touching it. They killed it just by not giving up. The room was very quiet. This kind of hunting seemed cruel to many species. Most predators killed quickly. This slow chase until death was disturbing. Professor Veltar seemed pleased by their reaction. Now you understand why humans were the apex predators of Earth. They combined intelligence with endurance. No other creature could match this combination. The next hologram showed humans making tools. They chipped stones into sharp points. They tied the points to long sticks to make spears. They bent wood into bows and made arrows. Tool use was another human advantage. Most animals have natural weapons. Claws, teeth, poison, strength. Humans had none of these. So they made artificial weapons that were better than natural ones. A student that looked like a walking tree raised a branch. Professor, many species make tools. We arboreals grow our tools from our own bodies. True, the professor nodded. But human tools were different. They were not part of their bodies. They could be improved, replaced, shared with others. And they could make tools to make better tools. The hologram showed this process. Humans making hammers to shape metal. Using the metal to make better knives. Using the knives to make more complex tools. Each generation of tools was more advanced than the last. This is why humans spread across their entire planet so quickly. When they came to a new environment, they did not adapt their bodies. They made new tools instead. Desert tools for hot, dry places. Ice tools for cold places. Water tools for lakes and oceans. Sarah watched her classmates learning about human intelligence and adaptability. She felt proud of her species but also worried. The professor was making humans sound very dangerous. But the most important human trait was their social behavior. Professor Veltar continued. They lived in groups called tribes. These tribes could work together in ways we have never seen before. The hologram showed a large group of humans hunting a massive mammoth. Some humans dug pits and covered them with branches. Others drove the mammoth toward the pits using fire and loud noises. When the mammoth fell into a pit, more humans surrounded it with spears. Look at this coordination. No telepathy. No hive mind. No chemical signals. They planned this complex hunt using only sounds from their mouths. They could communicate abstract ideas, future plans, and detailed strategies. A blob-like student bubbled a question. How do we know so much about extinct creatures, Professor? Professor Veltar's crystal skin brightened with pride. Excellent question. Humans left behind more evidence than any other species we have studied. They made cave paintings showing their hunts. They buried their dead with tools and food. They even made maps and calendars. New holograms appeared showing cave walls covered with drawings. Humans hunting animals, making tools, dancing around fires. These paintings are 30,000 years old. They show us exactly how humans lived and hunted. But the most interesting paintings are the newest ones from just before they went extinct. The hologram changed to show different cave paintings. These showed humans fighting each other with advanced weapons. Cities burning, large groups of humans lying dead on battlefields. These final paintings tell the story of human extinction. They became too good at warfare. They turned their hunting skills against each other. The same intelligence that made them perfect predators also led to their destruction. Sarah felt uncomfortable. This was not how human history really went, but she could not correct the professor without revealing her secret. The evidence shows they developed advanced weapons very quickly, the professor continued. Bronze swords, iron spears, even early explosives. But they never learned to control their aggressive instincts. The hologram showed more scenes of human warfare. They fought over territory, resources, and ideas. Different human tribes had different beliefs about religion and government. Instead of talking about their differences, they tried to kill each other. A mantis-like student clicked her mandibles. Could they not have learned to live in peace? Professor Veltar's crystal skin dimmed sadly. Perhaps, but we will never know. The archaeological evidence is clear. About 12,000 years ago, all human settlements suddenly went silent. No more cave paintings, no more tool-making sites, no more burial grounds. They simply vanished from the fossil record. The room was quiet. Even though humans were supposed to be extinct monsters, many students felt sad about their disappearance. Some scientists believe they killed each other in a final, planet-wide war, the professor said. Others think they destroyed their environment and starved to death. A few believe a plague wiped them out. But everyone agrees on one thing: humans are extinct. Sarah looked around the room. Her classmates were absorbing this false history of human extinction. They believed every word because Professor Veltar was the galaxy's leading expert on Earth species. This is why we can study humans safely now, the professor continued. They are gone. We can learn from their hunting methods without fear of meeting them. We can understand their social structures without worrying about their aggressive nature. He smiled with his crystal teeth. Imagine if creatures like this had survived to develop space travel. Imagine if persistent predators who never gave up, who could adapt to any environment, who worked together in coordinated packs, had spread to other worlds. Several students made nervous sounds. The idea was clearly frightening to them. They would have been unstoppable, Professor Veltar said. Perfect hunters with advanced technology, spreading across the galaxy like a virus. Every planet would be their hunting ground. Every species would be their prey. Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. The professor was describing humans as if they were some kind of galactic plague. She wanted to stand up and tell everyone the truth. Humans were not extinct monsters. They were peaceful members of the galactic community. But something made her stay quiet. She wanted to hear more. She wanted to understand exactly what other species thought about humans. Fortunately, the professor said, we live in a safe universe. The apex predators of Earth destroyed themselves before they could threaten anyone else. We can study them like we study ancient fossils. Interesting, educational, but completely harmless. The class was almost over. Students began packing their things. As they prepared to leave, many of them looked at Sarah. She realized they were probably thinking about how much she resembled the extinct predators they had just learned about. If only they knew the truth. As Sarah gathered her books, she overheard two students talking near the door. Those humans sound terrifying, said the cat-like student. Good thing they are all dead, replied a floating ethereal. Can you imagine meeting one in person? Sarah walked past them toward the exit. Neither student realized Sarah had been thinking all week about what Professor Veltar taught the class. Every night she lay in her small dorm room and wondered what to do. Should she tell the truth? Should she keep her secret? The decision was becoming harder each day. Today was the final lecture about humans. Professor Veltar had promised to share his conclusions about why apex predators like humans were dangerous to galactic civilization. Sarah arrived early and took her usual seat in the back corner. The lecture hall filled up quickly. Word had spread about the fascinating extinct predators from Earth. Students from other classes had come to listen. Sarah counted almost 300 beings in the room now. All of them were excited to learn about the terrifying humans who were safely dead. Professor Veltar entered carrying his crystal tablet and several data chips. His forearms moved busily as he set up multiple hologram projectors. Today's presentation was clearly going to be his biggest yet. Welcome, students. Today we conclude our study of Earth's apex predators with the most important question: what would have happened if humans had survived? The room became completely silent. This was what everyone wanted to know. The first hologram showed a map of the galaxy with Earth marked by a small red dot near the edge. Humans lived here, on the outer rim of galactic civilization. If they had developed space travel, this is probably the path they would have taken. Red lines began spreading out from Earth like veins of blood. They reached nearby star systems, then kept spreading. Within seconds, the red lines covered half the galaxy. Based on their expansion rate on Earth, humans would have reached 50 star systems within 100 years of developing faster than light travel. Within 500 years, they would have spread to every habitable planet in the galaxy. A student who looked like a walking crystal raised her hand. But Professor, many species have spread across multiple worlds. Why would humans be different? Professor Veltar smiled. Excellent question. Let me show you. The hologram changed to show different alien colonies, peaceful cities with beautiful architecture, gardens and parks, art galleries and schools. When most species colonize new worlds, they build homes. They create culture. They establish trade. They live in harmony with their environment. The professor's voice was warm and proud. Galactic civilization is built on cooperation and mutual respect. The hologram shifted to show what human colonies might have looked like. Cities surrounded by high walls, military bases instead of art galleries, factories instead of gardens. Human colonies would have been different. Humans were persistence predators. They never stopped hunting. Even when they had enough food, they kept hunting until their prey was extinct. They could not control their predator instincts. Sarah felt her face getting hot. The professor was making humans sound like mindless killing machines. This was not how humans really were, but she still could not speak up without revealing her identity. Worse, the professor continued, humans were pack hunters who competed with each other. Human colonies would not have worked together peacefully. They would have fought each other for resources and territory. The hologram showed human spaceships attacking each other, planets burning, refugee ships fleeing destroyed worlds. Human space colonies would have been constantly at war. Each colony would try to expand and take resources from others. They would have turned space itself into a hunting ground. A blob-like student bubbled nervously. But surely they would have learned to be peaceful eventually. Professor Veltar shook his head with all four arms. The archaeological evidence says no. Humans fought wars for their entire existence. Small tribe wars, city wars, nation wars. As their technology improved, their wars became more destructive. They never learned to stop fighting. The hologram now showed a timeline of human history according to the professor's research. Every period was marked by warfare and conflict. If humans had reached the stars, they would have brought their warfare with them. Planet killer weapons, star destroyer bombs, entire solar systems turned into battlefields. Sarah clenched her hands under her desk. Everything the professor was saying was wrong. Humans had learned to be peaceful. They had joined galactic civilization as partners, not conquerors. But the professor's false evidence made his theory sound reasonable. The most terrifying possibility, Professor Veltar said, his crystal skin darkening with worry, is what would have happened when humans encountered other intelligent species. The hologram showed human ships approaching alien worlds, peaceful alien cities, unsuspecting populations going about their daily lives. Humans saw every other species as either prey or competition. When they met mammoths, they hunted them to extinction. When they met other human tribes, they conquered or destroyed them. They had no concept of coexistence. The hologram showed human armies landing on alien planets, cities burning, alien refugees fleeing their homes. Humans would not have seen us as neighbors or friends. They would have seen us as resources to be harvested or obstacles to be removed. Their persistence hunting instincts would have made them hunt entire species until nothing was left. Several students made sounds of fear and disgust. A tree-like student's leaves turned brown with stress. An ethereal floating near the front dimmed his light to almost nothing. Sarah looked around the room and saw genuine terror on alien faces. They were not just learning about extinct predators anymore. They were imagining their own extinction at human hands. Professor Veltar seemed to enjoy the fear he was creating. The galaxy dodged a catastrophe when humans destroyed themselves. If they had survived and reached the stars, galactic civilization would not exist. We would all be extinct or enslaved. The hologram showed the final image, a galaxy-wide map covered in red. Every planet marked as conquered by human forces. Empty space where alien civilizations used to be. This is why we study extinction events, the professor concluded. Sometimes the extinction of a dangerous species protects all other life in the galaxy. The death of humans 12,000 years ago may have been the most fortunate event in galactic history. The room erupted in discussion. Students talked excitedly about how lucky they were that humans had killed themselves off. They shared theories about what human conquest would have been like. They thanked their various gods that apex predators had remained safely on Earth. Sarah sat quietly in the back corner, listening to 300 alien beings celebrate the extinction of her species. She listened to them describe humans as galaxy-destroying monsters who deserved to die. She heard them express relief that creatures like her could never threaten them. The irony was overwhelming. These students had been sitting next to a human for months. They had borrowed her notes, asked her questions, even invited her to study groups. None of them had ever felt threatened by her presence. But now they were terrified of the idea of meeting someone exactly like her. Professor Veltar raised his arms for silence. In conclusion, students, we can be grateful that this apex predator eliminated itself before becoming a threat to galactic peace. Imagine if such persistence predators had developed interstellar travel. Imagine if pack-hunting, tool-using, never-surrendering predators had spread across the stars. He paused dramatically. The galaxy would face an unprecedented threat. Every world would be a hunting ground. Every species would be prey. There would be no escape from creatures who never gave up, who could adapt to any environment, who worked together with terrifying coordination. The professor's crystal skin brightened as he delivered his final words. Fortunately, we live in a universe where the most dangerous predators are safely extinct. We can study them as curiosities, learn from their mistakes, and be grateful that we will never have to face such creatures in person. The room filled with sounds of agreement and relief. Students clapped, chittered, bubbled, and made other species-appropriate sounds of approval. They were celebrating their safety from the terrible humans. Sarah sat in her chair feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and something else. Amusement, maybe, or irony. She was not sure what to call it. The students around her had no idea they were applauding their own ignorance. They were celebrating their safety from a threat that had been sitting among them all semester. They were relieved that they would never meet a persistence predator who never gave up, never stopped learning, and could adapt to any situation, if they only knew. Sarah looked at her notebook. She had filled it with detailed notes about what other species thought of humans. She had learned about their fears, their assumptions, their completely wrong theories about human nature and history. This information could be very useful. Humans were still a small part of galactic civilization. They were still learning how to fit in with other species. Knowing what aliens were afraid of could help humans avoid causing unnecessary fear. But first, Sarah had a decision to make. She could keep quiet and let the professor continue teaching lies about human extinction. She could graduate, go home to Earth, and share what she had learned with human leadership. Her people could continue hiding their true identity and slowly integrate into galactic society, or she could raise her hand. Sarah looked around the room one more time. 300 alien beings celebrating the death of her species. A professor teaching lies. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. 300 alien beings stared at Sarah Chen in complete shock. The only sound in the huge lecture hall was the soft humming of the hologram projectors cooling down. Then, everything happened at once. A Kythera student near the front made a high-pitched shrieking sound and scrambled backward so fast that she knocked over her desk. An ethereal in a floating suit suddenly turned bright red with alarm and shot up toward the ceiling. The tree-like arboreals in the front row rustled their leaves frantically and started moving toward the exits. "That is impossible," Professor Veltar said, his voice shaking. His forearms were frozen in midair, still holding his crystal tablet. "Humans are extinct. My research clearly shows they died out 12,000 years ago." Sarah remained standing calmly in the back corner. She had expected this reaction, but seeing it happen was still strange. These were her classmates. She had studied with them for months. She had helped some of them with their homework. Now they were looking at her like she was a dangerous wild animal. "Your research shows what we wanted you to find," Sarah said gently. "Humans have been part of the galactic community for 37 years now. We have been studying alongside you, trading with you, working with you. We have been living on your worlds and going to your schools." A mantis-like student near the middle of the room clicked her mandibles in distress. "But you are so small," she whispered. "Where are your claws?" Your fangs? Your natural weapons. Sarah smiled. It was meant to be a friendly expression. But in the current situation, it seemed to terrify her classmates even more. Several students near her moved to seats farther away. We do not need claws or fangs anymore, Sarah explained. We evolved past that. Professor, you were right about humans being persistence predators and pack hunters, but you missed the most important part of human evolution. Professor Veltar was staring at her with his crystal eyes wide. His skin had turned a pale blue color that Sarah had never seen before. It was probably the Zellarian equivalent of going white with shock. What part? He asked in a voice barely above a whisper. We learned to hunt knowledge instead of prey, Sarah said. We learned to persist in learning rather than killing. We learned to use our pack hunting instincts to protect others instead of destroying them. The room was still mostly empty near Sarah. Students had moved away from her without even thinking about it. She was now sitting in a circle of empty seats about 10 feet wide. But the evidence, Professor Veltar stammered. The archaeological sites. The extinction layer in the fossil record. The absence of any advanced human artifacts, Sarah nodded. All carefully created by human teams working with galactic archaeologists. When first contact protocols were established with the Galactic Council 37 years ago, human leadership made a decision. We would be safer if other species saw us as a newly evolved, peaceful race rather than the terrifying apex predators your scientists had already catalogued. A blob-like student near the door bubbled a frightened question. How many of you are there? Enough, Sarah answered simply. She did not want to give exact numbers. That information was still classified. We live on 17 different worlds now. We have been integrated into galactic society for over 3 decades. An ethereal floating near the ceiling dimmed his light and asked, What do you want from us? Sarah looked around the room at all the frightened faces. Some students were edging toward the exits. Others seemed frozen in their seats. A few looked like they might faint. We want the same thing we have always wanted, she said calmly. To survive. To learn to grow. To protect our communities. Communities? Professor Veltar's voice cracked. What communities? Sarah gestured around the lecture hall. You. All of you. You are our communities now. Humans do not hunt for territory or resources anymore, Professor. We hunt for knowledge, for understanding, for ways to protect the people we care about. A crystalline student near the front made a sound like breaking glass. You mean you have been studying us? Learning our weaknesses? Planning attacks? I mean I have been learning xenobiology because I find other species fascinating, Sarah replied. I have been taking notes on your lecture because I wanted to understand what you thought about my people. I have been doing homework with my study group because I enjoy working with friends. She paused and looked directly at several students who had been in her study group. They all looked terrified now. The Kythera student over there helped me understand quantum biology last month. The ethereal by the door shared his notes when I was sick and missed class. The arboreal in the front row invited me to her birthday celebration. Sarah pointed to each student as she mentioned them. They all seemed to shrink back when she looked at them. These are not hunting behaviors, Sarah continued. These are friendship behaviors, community behaviors, pack bonding behaviors. Professor Veltar was slowly shaking his head with all 4 arms. But you are apex predators, persistence hunters. You cannot just stop being what you are. You are right, Sarah agreed. We cannot stop being what we are. But what we are is more complex than your research suggested. She walked slowly down the aisle toward the front of the room. Students moved out of her way, but she noticed they did not run. They were scared, but they were not panicking. That was a good sign. Professor, your research was correct about human hunting methods. We are persistence predators. We never give up when we are pursuing a goal. We work in coordinated groups. We adapt to any environment. We turn everything into a tool or a weapon if we need to. Sarah had reached the front of the lecture hall now. She stood next to Professor Veltar's desk, looking up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her. But you missed one crucial detail in your archaeological evidence, she continued. Humans never hunted their own prey to extinction on purpose. When we eliminated mammoths and cave bears, it was an accident. We were not trying to destroy them. We were just trying to survive. She turned to face Professor Veltar directly. When we realized what we were doing to other species, we changed our behavior. We developed farming so we would not need to hunt wild animals. We created laws to protect endangered species. We learned to control our predator instincts. But the warfare, Professor Veltar protested weakly. The constant fighting. The archaeological evidence shows humans were always at war. Yes, we fought wars, Sarah admitted, but we also ended them. Every human war in history ended with peace treaties, with former enemies becoming allies. We fought each other until we learned that cooperation was more effective than conflict. Sarah looked back up at her classmates. Do you know what the last major human war was about? Nobody answered. They were all too shocked to speak. It was about whether humans should make contact with alien civilizations or stay isolated on Earth. The isolationists wanted to keep Earth hidden and protect humanity from alien threats. The cooperationists wanted to join the galactic community and share knowledge with other species. She smiled again, and this time a few students did not flinch away. Obviously, the cooperationists won, and the first thing they did was figure out how to make contact safely. They studied galactic history and realized that most species would be afraid of a race that matched the description of Earth's apex predators. Sarah walked back toward her seat, moving slowly so she would not startle anyone. So we created false archaeological evidence showing that humans had gone extinct. We disguised our true history and presented ourselves as a young, peaceful species that had just discovered space travel. How long? Professor Veltar asked weakly. How long have you been deceiving us? 37 years, Sarah repeated. Ever since first contact, every human in galactic space has been living under a false identity. We have been pretending to be less intelligent, less adaptable, and less dangerous than we actually are. A Kithara student who had been silent until now finally spoke up. Why are you telling us this now? Why reveal the truth? Sarah sat back down in her original seat. The circle of empty chairs around her had not changed, but at least no more students were leaving the room. Because I could not listen to you celebrate my people's extinction any longer, she said simply. Because you deserve to know the truth about who has been sitting next to you in class all semester. She opened her notebook and looked down at her notes. And because you need to understand what humans really are if we are going to continue being friends and classmates. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of people thinking hard about what they had just learned. Professor Veltar slowly sat down in his chair behind his desk. His crystal skin was still pale blue, but he seemed to be getting control of himself. If humans are not extinct, he said carefully, then everything I have taught about galactic safety is wrong. Not wrong, Sarah corrected. Incomplete. Humans are still apex predators, Professor. We still have all the traits you described, but we have learned to use those traits to protect instead of destroy. She looked around the room one more time. We are still persistence hunters, but now we hunt for knowledge, for solutions to problems, for ways to help our communities. We are still pack hunters, but our pack includes everyone we care about, regardless of species. Sarah closed her notebook and put it in her bag. We are still the same creatures who could adapt to. Sarah did not go to her dorm room after class. Instead, she went to the student garden on the university's roof. It was a quiet place where students from different worlds had planted trees and flowers from their home planets. She needed time to think about what she had just done. She sat on a bench next to a small tree with silver leaves that chimed softly in the breeze. It was from the arboreal homeworld. The student who had planted it was the same one who had invited Sarah to her birthday celebration last month. Now that student probably saw Sarah as a dangerous predator. Sarah was still sitting there an hour later when Professor Veltar found her. The crystal-skinned Zalarian approached slowly, moving carefully like someone approaching a wild animal. His forearms were held in a non-threatening position that Sarah recognized from her xenobiology studies. It was a Zalarian peace gesture, Student Chen, he said quietly. May I sit with you? Sarah nodded and moved over to make room on the bench. Professor Veltar sat down, but not too close. There was still about 3 feet of space between them. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the chiming leaves and the distant sounds of the university. Finally, Professor Veltar spoke. How many of my colleagues know the truth? He asked. All of them, Sarah replied. Every professor, every administrator, every staff member. The only people who did not know were the students. Professor Veltar's crystal skin dimmed with embarrassment. So I have been teaching lies to my classes while the university leadership knew the truth. Not lies, Sarah said gently. Incomplete information. Your research about human hunting methods and social behavior was mostly correct. You just had the wrong conclusion about what happened to us. The professor was quiet for another minute. Then he asked, Why did the university allow this deception? Why not just tell students the truth from the beginning? Sarah turned to look at him. What would have happened if you had started your first lecture by saying, "Today we will learn about humans, the apex predators of Earth, who are now living among us as your classmates?" Professor Veltar thought about this. There would have been panic. Students would have been too frightened to attend classes with humans. Some species might have demanded that humans be removed from the university. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Fear makes learning impossible. But curiosity makes learning exciting. You made my classmates curious about humans by presenting us as safely extinct. Now they have a foundation of knowledge to build on. Professor Veltar's skin brightened slightly. You are saying that learning about extinct humans prepared them to understand living humans? I hope so, Sarah said. We will find out tomorrow. They sat quietly again. Sarah watched other students walking around the campus below. Some were alone, lost in thought. Others walked in small groups, talking animatedly. She wondered how many of them had heard about what happened in the xenobiology lecture. Student Chen, Professor Veltar said suddenly, you said humans have been hiding their identity for 37 years. But you revealed the truth today.
Why now? Sarah smiled.
Because it was time. Humans have been slowly integrating into galactic society for almost 4 decades. We have proven that we can be peaceful members of the community. We have shown that we can control our predator instincts. She gestured toward the university buildings around them. We have been your students, your colleagues, your friends, your business partners. Some humans have even married members of other species and started families. Professor Veltar's eyes widened. Interspecies families. With humans? My roommate last year was half human, half ethereal, Sarah said casually. Her mother is human. Her father is from the gas clouds of Vega. She can exist in both atmospheric and energy forms. The professor stared at her. That is genetically impossible. No, just difficult. Humans are very good at adapting to challenges, Sarah grinned, including the challenge of making impossible things possible. Before Professor Veltar could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Sarah looked up to see 3 students walking toward them. She recognized them from the xenobiology class. The Kythera student who had helped her with quantum biology, the ethereal who had shared his notes when she was sick, and the arboreal who had invited her to the birthday party. Sarah tensed, unsure what to expect. Were they coming to confront her? To demand answers? To tell her she was not welcome at the university anymore? The 3 students stopped about 6 feet away from the bench. They looked nervous but not terrified. The Kythera student, whose name was Click Whistle Hum in her own language but who went by Melody in Galactic Standard, stepped forward first. Sarah, Melody said, her mandibles clicking nervously. We wanted to talk to you. We have been friends for months, added the ethereal who called himself Bright. His gaseous form was glowing a soft blue color that indicated curiosity rather than fear. We want to understand what this means. The arboreal, whose name translated to singing bark, rustled her silver leaves. Are you still the same person we have been studying with, or were you pretending to be someone else? Sarah looked at her 3 friends. These were the students who had made her feel welcome at the university. They had included her in study groups, invited her to social events, and treated her like any other student. Now they were learning that she belonged to a species they had just heard described as galaxy-conquering apex predators. I am exactly the same person I have always been, Sarah said carefully. I never lied about my personality, my interests, or my feelings. I only concealed information about human history and abilities. But you are a persistence predator, Melody said, her compound eyes reflecting the light from Bright's gaseous form. Professor Veltar said humans never give up hunting their prey. Sarah nodded. That is true. I am a persistence predator. Do you want to see how it works? All 3 students took a step backward. Professor Veltar's crystal skin went pale again. Sarah laughed. I am not going to hunt you. I am going to show you what I have been persistently hunting since I came to this university. She pulled out her notebook and opened it to the first page. Knowledge about xenobiology. I have been persistently hunting information about how different species live, reproduce, communicate, and interact. She flipped through the pages, showing detailed notes and diagrams. I never gave up on understanding quantum biology, even when it was difficult. I never stopped trying to learn about ethereal energy metabolism, even when the concepts seemed impossible. Sarah looked up at her friends. I used my persistence hunting instincts to chase understanding instead of prey. I used my pack hunting coordination to work with study groups instead of hunting parties. Bright's gaseous form brightened with what looked like relief. So when you helped me with stellar chemistry equations, you were hunting knowledge, Sarah finished, using my natural human abilities to learn everything I could about your species and your academic challenges. Then using that knowledge to help a friend succeed. Singing Bark's leaves rustled with what Sarah had learned was the arboreal equivalent of laughter. You hunted solutions to my homework problems. Exactly, Sarah grinned. I persistently pursued answers until I found them, then shared them with my pack. Which includes all of you. Melody clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Your pack, you consider us part of your pack? Sarah's expression became serious. Melody, you helped me understand quantum biology when I was struggling. Bright, you shared your notes when I was sick and missed class. Singing Bark, you invited me to celebrate your birthday with your family. She closed her notebook and held it against her chest. In human terms, that makes you my pack. It means I will protect you, support you, and never give up on helping you succeed. It means I will use all of my apex predator abilities to make sure you are safe and happy. The three students looked at each other, then back at Sarah. Some of their nervousness seemed to be fading. So when Professor Valtar said humans would hunt other species to extinction, Bright asked carefully, that was wrong? Not wrong about our capabilities, Sarah replied. Wrong about our intentions. We could hunt other species to extinction, but we choose not to. We learned that protecting our pack is more important than defeating our prey. Professor Veltar, who had been listening silently, finally spoke up. But what happens when humans encounter a truly hostile species? What happens when diplomacy fails and cooperation is impossible? Sarah's friendly expression became cold and hard. For just a moment, her three friends could see the apex predator that Professor Veltar had described in his lectures. Then we protect our pack, she said quietly. We use every persistence hunting skill, every pack coordination ability, every adaptive technique we have evolved over millions of years. We become exactly what Professor Veltar described in his lectures. The silence stretched for several seconds. Sarah's friends looked genuinely frightened for the first time since approaching her. Then Sarah's expression softened back to normal. But that has only happened twice in the 37 years since humans joined galactic civilization. Both times we were protecting other species from genuine threats. Both times we worked with galactic peacekeeping forces instead of acting alone. What kind of threats? Melody asked.